Welcome back to Frugalman Outdoors. I'd like to take a moment to apologize for not being able to put any videos out for a while. I had some phone problems and I lost a lot of my content, and it took me about a month to get everything straightened out. So now I have a new phone and I'm trying to get caught up on some of the content that I was able to save. So let's get back to it, and here's the first video after my crash of my phone. Welcome back to Frugalman Outdoors. Today we're going to change the carburetor on my Black Max Weed Eater. It's a small 2-cycle engine and it's been acting up, so I ordered a new carburetor from Amazon and they sent it in. It cost me, I believe it was $15. They got a gasket, excuse me, the gnats got me, a filter for the air filter. The carburetor is all in one piece. I sent a spark plug, extra fuel filter, and primer bulbs. Also, there's an extra gasket in here. And then they actually sent 2 of the fuel filters and 2 of the primer bulbs, but of course we only need 1. And their carburetor actually comes with a primer bulb on it, so I'm not going to need any primer bulb today. I'll set those aside. Also, they sent 2 fuel lines, which is a little excessive. I don't need that much, but I don't think there's anything wrong with the fuel lines I have, so I'm probably not going to change those today. So let's tear into it. Okay, for starters, we're going to take off the breather. Now, I removed all of this a couple months ago. I was trying to order just the gaskets, and it was a lot of trouble just ordering the gaskets. So I put it back together and I ordered a carburetor, and when it came in, I decided I'm just going to change the carburetor and forget about trying to rebuild this carburetor since it was so cheap. So there's that air filter. Pretty nasty. This Weed Eater motor is about 4 years old and I've never done anything to it, so it's about time for a tune-up. Alright, in order to take this off, we're going to need a straight screwdriver. Break that loose. That's making a bunch of noise. Hope you can see that. There's a lot of shadow here. It's very bright outside, so I'm underneath my back porch umbrella. Make sure if you're taking these apart to set your screws out to where you can remember where they go. I'm not much of a mechanic, but I try to keep up with everything. That way I don't forget where it goes back to. Okay. Like I said, I already had this taken apart about 2 months ago. I put it all back together so I wouldn't forget where everything went. That comes off there. And then just slide that off to the side. And then the carburetor will come right off. Now, like I said, I already had the fuel lines off, so I didn't show you taking those off. But make sure when you take your fuel lines off that you remember which one come off of which side. That way when your primer bulb starts pumping, you're not pumping the fuel back into the fuel tank. I'll set that aside. And it looks like, I'll compare it to the other one, and it is exactly the same. Now sometimes your aftermarket parts may not look exactly the same, and then you have to figure out which way they go to, you may have to change a gasket or something in order to make it work properly. But this one here is exactly the same, so we don't have any problems. And then this gasket here, I did not get a replacement gasket for this, but I believe this one here is what they sent to replace that, and lines up perfectly right there, so that is correct. That's the one that they sent for that. Now if you notice, there's a hole right here, and that allows fuel to travel through that gasket. You're going to make sure when you put the new gasket on that that hole is lined up correctly with that hole right there. You see that little hole? Put it in there. So as that lines up, the carburetor is slightly different. Now the hole's in a different position on this carburetor. So this hole here is actually up here. So when we put this gasket on, we have to make sure the gasket is turned over to where the hole lines up with the hole in the carburetor. Now you could trim this all off and make it fit better. As a matter of fact, I believe that's what I'm going to do. So I'll be right back. I'm going to get a pair of scissors and I'm going to trim this down. Okay, I didn't get scissors. I went and got a small pair of shears. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim some of this excess off of here. That way it doesn't stick out and get in the way. Get that out of the way. So now it's a whole lot smaller. It's closer to the other size. I'm not going to try to make it perfect to make it look like that, as long as it does its job. So now when we put it in place, you have to make sure that that hole and that small hole right there are lined up, just like that. Can you see that? Okay. So now we're going to put this back into place. Make sure the fuel lines are pointing down. And this piece right here is the cable. Not sure if you can see that. That cable right there has to get locked into right here. So I'm going to lock that in first, and then I'm going to turn this up, line it up. I'll take my bolts and run it through. All the way through there, through the gasket. Now I'm going to take both of my bolts and put them in place. That way I have less chance of pinching my gasket. I don't want to pinch it and cause it to be leaking. If it sucks air, it will not work properly. So line it up, put that bolt through the hole in the carburetor and then through the gasket. Push them both all the way through and line that up. Now something ain't lined up right. Okay, there we go. It's all the way in now. Make sure they're both sticking all the way out, and then see if you can see that these two holes here where the screws go in. I'll line those up. Now I'll start those by hand so I don't accidentally cross thread them. Everything here is aluminum, so if you cross thread it, it'd be really hard to straighten it out. Okay, now that I've got all that started by hand, I'll tighten one up, not all the way down, just to where it's touching the airframe, the filter of the air intake. And then bring this one down, and it's going in smoothly, so I know it's not cross-threaded. And before I cinch it down, I want to make sure everything's lined up right and not pinched. It's looking good. So now I'll start bringing it all the way down tight. And you want to bring them both down tight before you start to torque them down. I'm just going to give one little extra turn. I don't have a torque wrench, so I'm just going to give it a good twist, and then do the same with the other one. A good twist. I'm right-handed, and I'm using my left hand so I don't over torque it. And now everything's moving correctly. Oh, there we go. Now notice that the throttle's moving properly. Nothing's in a bind. And now I'm going to make sure I line my fuel lines up. Slide them into place. Now I know they're a little bit on the yellow, kind of dark brown yellow colored, but like I said, they're flexible, they're not cracked up, so I'm not going to change them yet. I have the lines in case I decide to do so. Alright, and I'll put my air filter in place. Make sure that's lined up exactly right. And then I'll put my filter cover on. Okay. Now I don't think I'm going to need it, but since they sent it anyway, I'm going to go ahead and change the spark plug. I have a chainsaw wrench which matches up to the spark plug just fine. So I'll pop that off out of the way and take that off. Yeah, that's not in bad shape, but I'm going to go ahead and change it anyway, since I got a new one. And same thing with the other bolts. You want to start your spark plug by hand, get it as tight as you can by hand before you even put a wrench on it. Put it in there, give it a little snug, and that's all you need, just so it doesn't move around. And then you put your wire back in place. Now I was going to change my fuel filter, but I don't believe there's a problem with my fuel filter, so I'm going to put it back in the box and save it for later. Okay, now I'm going to prime it up. There we go. I don't know if you can see that, but that fuel is pumping in there just fine. That's working. Okay. Now, I'm going to try to start this up and see how it runs. Well, there you have it. That was a successful change out. Carburetor's changed. It runs real good. It's smoking a little bit. That may be because the gas was a little bit old. But DIY carburetor change out on your weed eater. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.